Hi, I'm Chris Gasiorek. I'm the Vice President of Watercraft Preservation and Programs at Mystic Seaport Museum, and happy to welcome you back for the second part of our Watercraft Hall tour. As you can see right now, I'm standing next to a door that says Brooms, and a fun little thing as I take people on tours through this space, as I'll often mention, usually at the completion of the first half of the Watercraft Hall where they're a bit in awe of boats, and I take them up to a door that says Brooms, and I tell them that we also have the largest collection of early American brooms. And they give me a funny look because they thought they were on a boat tour. And as we go through, while we do have a few brooms in here to keep it clean, it is mostly boats. So we're going to dive into a bit more of our collection here. And we'll start right off with a boat that I walked by probably 50 times before I took a look at it. This is a 1914 rowboat. Well, it looks like a rowboat, but it was built by the Evinrude Motor Corporation when they were first producing outboard engines. And interestingly, when outboards started being produced, most vessels looked more like Dauntless here, with sort of a narrow stern and designed for the operator to sit near the middle of the vessel and row. If you put an outboard here and an operator and a fuel tank, the weight is all off and you end up with the stern way down and the bow way up. So Evinrude said, well, what if we take the transom, make it a little wider, make the entry narrow because it's going to be fast because it has one of their great motors on it, and set it up so the operator, there's enough buoyancy aft for the operator to sit comfortably, more space, and you get the shape of this boat, which if you think about it is kind of also the shape of all power boats after. So kind of the first shape of engine aft and operator aft that we see in powerboats today. Interesting little day sailor here. We see design of sailing vessels go in two different directions: very narrow and very deep for stability, and then very wide and for planing and long fin keels like we have on some modern racing boats. And obviously this is more the latter. With a very deep draft, very narrow bow, and kind of an interesting configuration with a little cat rig. And you can see the operator sitting low and down low with his head just at deck level. This is on my list of boats in here that I would most like to take out and try for a sail. I'd love to see how she sails. I mentioned we have many materials. This is a tin boat. We have several tin boats, and the story of the origin of these is the manufacturer was a maker of tin facades for New York City brownstones, and he had a manufacturing facility where he could press them. And he went fishing with a friend of his in a wooden vessel that sprung a plank and they almost sank, and he said, well, I think I can do better than this, and retooled some of his factory to actually press boats out of tin. Fortunately, they didn't do too well in saltwater, so there aren't many of them left, but we do have several of them in the collection here. And this is a pulling boat. A couple of ice boats we have on the upper rack. We have on the left is a South Bay scooter. Those were used on the bays on the south shore of Long Island. Different from an ice boat that you'll see that is designed just to stay on its runners. Those south shore bays often would be some ice, some water, and these were actually designed to be able to skip over open sections of water. There's some video of that, and we have some folks around who have done that, and some really exciting sailing, both going fast on ice, but then skipping over, literally like skipping like a stone over open stretches of water. We do have a few Herreshoffs. This is a Herreshoff Amphicraft. This were built during the Great Depression era when there weren't very many commissions for large yachts, but there were people who still wanted to go sailing. So Herreshoff designed and built the boat and trailer designed to be able to sail it, row it, or motor, and tow behind a car with a wooden trailer. Herreshoff, very well known for production methods and doing everything in-house. So everything was in-house built except for the wheels on the trailer were actually Indian motorcycle wheels. All right, we kind of come into our corner of peapods, a bunch of different peapod vessels, double-ended small rowboats and working craft. And then we kind of go down into our wall of canoes, as well as Adirondack guideboats, St. Lawrence skiffs, just beautiful woodwork in all of these. One thing you might notice as we walk around is there are some boats that are in less good condition than others. The idea really of this collection is to be not a museum of perfectly restored vessels, but to be a library of vessel construction. So in our collection, we're looking for the most original vessel, not necessarily one that's been modified along its years. So some of those, because they haven't been modified, are in less than perfect condition, but we're most interested in how they were built, how the original builder used construction techniques, etc. So if you see some boats that look like they need work, well, it's because we're more of a library of old books rather than fancy reproductions. Some canvas kayaks or canoes. Here's actually another South Bay scooter. You can see it from the top. They had giant sailing rigs on it, a very long bowsprit that's not connected right now. And interestingly, the helmsman would have actually sat right about here. There's no steering, there's no tiller, and the helmsman would actually hold a knotted line, that is the jib sheet, and would steer the boat by changing the sail configuration as well as by changing weight of the crew. And they would sail these with 4 or 5 large folks, and they're pretty exciting when you see them underway. Another recent addition is this Lowell's boat shop built in the late 30s, has its original Palmer engine in it, which is a local Connecticut built engine. So very original, and our crew, when it came in, gave it a little shine up, so she looks really good, but everything is original on her. Another interesting boat we have here is our 1904 Elko gasoline launch. This was a 1904 early gasoline engine. It had a French gasoline engine. Around the turn of the century, there were tons and tons of engine manufacturers, and this boat was actually shown at the 1905 New York Boat Show to show off that engine manufacturer. This is another one that I would love to take for a spin on the river, but for anyone who's spends time on the water and drives boats, you'll notice if you look down at the running gear, she'd be pretty interesting to run because she has a small rudder above and forward of the propeller. You can see over here. So my thought is she would steer really good going 20 knots or going astern, but otherwise she's got a pretty sharp bow that might be interesting if you could keep it pointed anywhere. Into some more canoes. One interesting one that I like here. This is a small cedar canoe built by a guy named George Washington Nesmith Sears. He built this in 1905. He was an early writer for Field and Stream magazine and was a very early proponent of ultra lightweight backcountry travel, and that was in an era when that meant ultra lightweight meant you only took 10 horses with you. But this boat, if you actually lift it, weighs pretty close to nothing. I can, one finger lift half of it. And he had said, all you need is a light boat, a light pack, and just go off on your own. So a pretty neat vessel. We go down and our other material boats. We have 2 Inuit Kayaks, a single and a double, 1890 and 1910. These were from the Bering Sea area. Interesting thing on the single is when we think of a kayak, we think, sort of one hole, one person. But, excuse me, in reality, this would be more like a minivan of the Bering Sea where you could put 2 adults back to back and then even a small child underneath on top of your legs. So a little different point of view. The double would have probably been used for hunting with an Inuit rower and probably a Russian hunter. One nice thing I like about these is, if we're familiar with a modern plastic kayak that has the little lifting handle that usually falls apart, this has a very beautiful sewn-in lifting handle, and this is all sealskin. Come back, we have some sailing canoes, and then our gunboat collection. These are boats used for mostly duck hunting in shallow water and marshes, often built so that they could be towed over drier parts of the marsh or over ice even. Some interesting hull shapes. This one looks like a moccasin or a shoe. We've got one that is also built by our tin boat builder and even has some of the work that you might have seen on the facades that he was also building. So this is a tin duck boat. Hi, Mullins. One recent acquisition on duck boats. This was a family given to us last year, this green duck boat. It had been in the same family since it was built in the 1880s and had not been modified since the 1890s. So that's, to find something that old and an artifact that had been kept in a garage and not touched, still has original paint and original fittings. So really a lovely gift to the museum. We have, in this corner, we have a collection of small racing yachts. Penguin, Blue Jay. We have two Dyer Douse. Dyer Douse were designed and used as lifeboats on small combatants during World War II. The one on the left is built of plywood, which is how they were built during World War II. The one on the right, these two white boats, is actually their very first fiberglass model that they built after World War II. That was 1947. We keep going down. We've got our section of flat-bottom dories, Swampscott, as well as working fishing dories, various kinds. We even have one that is a Dory Kit. So kind of joke, this is the original IKEA flat pack for a dory. Some fishing dories. I'll poke in over here and I'll tell one little engine story. This is a Naphtha launch. These were popular 1870s until the World War I, when gasoline engines really took over. So the Naphtha engine, if you come over, Dan, and take a peek inside, you'll notice that's coils and lots of pumps and controls. The Naphtha engine was sort of a rule beater. After some high-profile steamboat boiler explosions in the 1840s, 50s, etc., there were new regulations imposed that said you had to have a licensed engineer on any steamboat, which is fine for a big Mississippi River steamboat, but for someone who just wanted to take their launch out for a spin in the harbor, they didn't really want to have to hire an engineer to come along with them. So somebody thought, what can I boil that is not steam, because the regulations specifically said steam? And someone thought, well, what about naphtha? And naphtha is actually kind of close to gasoline or Coleman stove fluid, so I'm not sure how great an idea boiling it is, but these actually worked out very well, and they were remarkably safe for what they were doing, although a little complex with tanks and pumps, and they actually burn the naphtha as well as use it for compressed vapor. All right. In addition to boats, we do have sails for all of our sailing craft, as well as sails for craft that we sort of wish we had. A couple of interesting big sails that we have here. These are cotton sails from the J-class yacht. I think these are from Enterprise. So some really neat hand stitching, some leather work, and you can imagine pulling these up and down would not be light, especially if they're wet. Another new acquisition that you may have seen last summer in the Thompson building. This is the Sting. This is a 1968 Donzi Hornet. One of the boats that we have that has been fully restored. Probably looks better today than she looked when she came out of the factory. The donors really did a fine job of restoring her, so she's beautiful. And some people saw this and said, what's Mystic Seaport have a fiberglass boat for? And yeah, it's 1968, so she is 52 years old at this point, and we have to take care of all the history. So she's a really pretty boat. Another interesting boat we have here in the middle of the rack over here with the black bottom, that is a lumberman's bateau used in Maine to guide rafts of logs up and down the rivers. You can see actually the transom's been cut off, so she did have an outboard motor at it at one point. Interesting thing about her, and especially from a conservation and study of watercraft, is kind of talk about footprints of history, and very rarely do we have the opportunity to see footprints of the people who sailed in and used these boats, because the story of the owners and sailors is really as big a part as that boat. But on this, because the lumbermen who would jump off the raft or off the boat onto rafts of logs would wear spiked shoes, when they would go in and out of the their boat, you can actually see footprints from the spike marks. So it's one of the few examples that we have that we can kind of see the footprints of history here. And it's an example of why we don't restore all the boats, because while we could restore and add new wood and make it even be constructed the same, we would lose a lot of the fabric of the history. So it's a neat story. Just poke down here and see this is our collection of yacht tenders and small auxiliary craft. And as you can see, there's just countless boats and countless stories here. And one thing we are working on is trying to make this space open to the public over the next few years. So I would hope to show you all of this in person. And thanks for spending a little time and seeing some of our boats. And hope to see you soon here at Mystic Seaport Museum.